44 people boarded this military plane. None ever came back. A true military mystery. People send me military mysteries. Stories passed down quietly through units. Questions veterans still carry decades later. Flights that never came home. And tonight's story? This one is real. In January of 1950, a U.S. Air Force transport aircraft, a Douglas C-54 Skymaster, vanished somewhere over the Yukon territory. 44 people were on board. No distress call, no wreckage, no answers. This wasn't a legend or a campfire story. This was a real military flight with real service members and real families waiting on the other end. And among those passengers was a young pregnant woman traveling with her toddler son, believing she was finally going home. Before we talk about the plane, before the theories, before the wilderness swallowed everything, we need to talk about her. The woman on the plane. Her name didn't become famous. It didn't make headlines or documentaries for decades. But it appeared on a passenger manifest, typed neatly beside the word dependent. She was a military wife, pregnant, traveling alone with her small toddler. In 1950, military families lived a life built on motion. Orders changed, bases shifted, seasons blurred together. You learned how to pack quickly, how to wait patiently, how to be strong quietly. She had already learned all of those things. She had waded through separations, through letters that took weeks to arrive, through winters so cold they made walls creak and skin sting. And now she was finally traveling south to warmer air, to friendly faces, to a place she could give birth, surrounded by family. She was carrying 2 lives that night, one inside her and one holding her hand. The morning of the flight. That morning in Anchorage, she dressed carefully, not fashionably, but practically. Wool layers, buttons checked twice, shoes meant for standing, not style. She packed light, the way military spouses learn to do. A small bag, diapers folded tightly, a toy for her son, something familiar, something safe. Her toddler didn't understand planes or distance. He understood that his mother was calm, and so he was calm too. Witnesses later said she looked tired, but hopeful. The kind of hope that comes when you believe the hardest part is already behind you. On board the C-54. The Douglas C-454 Skymaster wasn't glorious, and it wasn't glamorous. It was loud, cold, metallic, but it was trusted, reliable, a workhorse for the military. She sat where she was told, buckling her son beside her, adjusting his coat as the engines roared to life. The vibration startled him at first. She leaned close and whispered reassurances. It's okay. Mama is right here. She would have watched the crew move with practiced confidence. Young men, some barely older than she was. She probably thought what so many passengers think. They'll get us home. They'll get us home tonight. The flight into the Yukon. The plane lifted into the cold January sky, heading southeast from Alaska towards Montana. Below them stretched one of the remote regions of the earth. The Yukon doesn't announce itself. It doesn't roar. It waits. Miles and miles of forest, mountains folded into each other like sleeping giants. Snow that absorbs sound instead of reflecting it. As a wildlife biologist, I can tell you this land where nothing wastes energy. Animals move only when necessary. Predators don't chase what they cannot catch. Mistakes are not forgiven. This is a place where silence survives. The last transmission. A few hours into the flight, the crew checked in near a tiny settlement called Snag, Yukon. They reported icing had begun developing on the wings. Low visibility, turbulence. They were professional, calm, controlled. Not panic, just information. They had dealt with worse before. Somewhere on that flight, the woman would have felt the plane change slightly. Not dramatically, just enough to notice. She may have pulled her son closer. She may have placed a hand over her stomach. And then nothing. No mayday, no warning, no final words, just silence. The search. When the plane failed to reach its next checkpoint, alarms were raised. What followed was one of the largest search efforts for aircraft of its time. United States and Canadian military aircraft combed the skies. Maps were marked. Routes were retraced. Planes flew into blizzards. 4 search aircraft crashed. Their crews survived, but the irony wasn't lost on anyone. Days turned into weeks. Still, nothing. Nothing but the cold. No wreckage, no supplies, no sign of life. The Yukon kept its secret. The land and its silence, a true biologist perspective. If the plane went down in forested terrain, wolves would have heard it first, not with curiosity, but with caution. Bears, if awake, would have avoided it at first. Fire and noise, meaning danger. But they would have been drawn closer to any smells that could have meant food. Bears, drawn in, would have come closer. Birds would have circled later. Nature doesn't investigate, it absorbs. Snow would bury metal. Ice would preserve and conceal. Trees would grow around debris. Winter would pass. Then another. Then another. And eventually, time would do the rest. Over the decades, theories began to emerge. Some believe severe icing overwhelmed the aircraft. Others believe the pilots became disoriented. Whiteout conditions can erase horizons. Sky and ground can blend together. Your brain panics quietly. Up feels like down. Straight feels like descent. Others suspect mechanical failure, perhaps related to the earlier engine trouble. And then there's theories whispered late at night. The plane that veered off course, that it landed somewhere else, that no one thought to look, and the passengers are still alive. That they simply disappeared. Fans of the show Lost often note the early parallels. A passenger plane, a remote wilderness, dozens of lives gone. But real life doesn't offer neat package solutions. The waiting women. Back home, other women waited. Military wives, no waiting. They waited for word, for confirmation, for lists. Some refused to believe the plane was gone. Others were handed death certificates without bodies. No graves to visit, no answers to hold on to, just absence. The child who never grew up. The toddler would be much older today, elderly, in his 70s. If he survived, if he did, he would never have memories to lose, only a name on a manifest, only a mother holding him until the very end. Modern hope. Today, decades later, new technology might finally offer some answers. Satellite imaging, radar mapping, AI analysis of terrain. Volunteers still search because closure matters, because stories deserve endings. Could they be still out there? A final reflection. Sometimes mysteries aren't meant to scare us. They're meant to remind us how fragile certainty really is. A woman boarded a plane believing she was safe. A mother trusted the system. A child followed her lead. And then the Yukon swallowed them. Somewhere beneath the snow, beneath the trees, beneath time, their story waits, not for attention, not for remembrance. So tonight, as you walk around and fall asleep, as you rest, as you drift off away into the slumber, remember her. Because as long as we tell the story, she hasn't vanished. Theories have begun. Over the years, as official explanations failed to satisfy grieving families, another theory began to circulate, not in reports, not in press releases, but in conversations, in letters, in a quiet way speak when they're not sure if something is true, but can't stop thinking about it. Some wondered, what if the plane didn't crash immediately? What if it came down intact? Forced landing, emergency descent, a controlled impact in deep snow that absorbed the sound. It wouldn't have been impossible. The C-54 was a sturdy plane. Pilots were trained for the worst case scenarios, and snow deep, untouched snow can sometimes be forgiving. And that happened. There may have been survivors. That story refuses to disappear. There have been an unconfirmed story, never proven, never fully debunked, that circulates in parts of the Yukon. It tells of a small child found years later, not in a town, not near a road, but deep in a territory no child should have ever been able to reach alone. Some versions say the child was discovered by hunters, others by trappers. Others still claim it was indigenous oral account passed down through generations. The details change, but the core of the story remains. A young child was found, alive, too young to explain where he came from, too far from civilization for coincidence to make sense. Could it have been him? Could that child have been the toddler from the plain? No records confirm it. No DNA, no official adoption trail, no name that leads back to the manifest. And yet the timing lingers. It matches up. A missing child, a vanished aircraft, a wilderness vast enough to swallow evidence, but not stories as a wildlife.